Alright guys, so in this video I want to talk about a little bit more about the liver's function in with iron and copper. Just because it's an interesting thing to it's interesting. So we're just going to be talking about the liver's function with iron and copper. Okay, so let's talk about iron first. So what does it do with iron? Right? It is actually going to produce many of the proteins that are involved in iron transport and metabolism. So it's going to produce many proteins. Oh, and I should write so liver function. Okay. So one of the liver's functions is to produce many proteins for transport and metabolism in this case. So transport and metabolism. Okay. And some of the big some of the main proteins of these. So the proteins that it produces include transferrin, haptoglobin, and hemopexin. Okay. Hemopexin. Okay, so let's talk about these proteins. So transferrin, it is just going to transport iron in the plasma. Okay. So the liver produces transferrin, which is going to transport iron in the plasma. And the plasma is just in the blood. So the plasma is part of your blood. Okay. Yeah. What about haptoglobin? Haptoglobin, well, what it's going to do is it's going to look in the bloodstream. So the bloodstream, I'll just draw this to represent the bloodstream. And if there are any free hemoglobins, so hemoglobins that are, just floating on their own, so I'll draw these little dots to represent hemoglobins, free hemoglobins. Maybe I'm drawing too many. Just draw okay, these are our 3 hemoglobins. What it's going to do is it's going to bind to these hemoglobins. So I'll draw this circle to represent haptoglobin. So it's going to bind to these. And this is not an accurate depiction of the relative sizes. I'm just drawing them different sizes so that you can tell the difference. Haptoglobin is not necessarily this big compared to the free hemoglobin. But anyways, it's going to bind to the hemoglobin. And then it is going to be taken in by the liver. So each of these things, so the haptoglobin binded with the hemoglobin is going to be taken into the liver. So I'll draw the liver. This is the liver. Not a great drawing, but you get the idea. And then the iron from this hemoglobin has iron in it, is going to be stored in the liver, so it's going to be preserved that way. Okay. Well, actually, you should probably I'll just keep that there. So now let's talk about hemopexin, and I'll just sort of draw a line here to make sure we know that this diagram is not part of the hemopexin part. Okay, so what is the hemopexin going to do? Well, in your bloodstream, you can have heme. So let's draw these little things to represent heme. Okay, I'll just draw like 3 of them. And heme is one of the constituents of hemoglobin, okay? But it's only one of the constituents, so it's just a part of that hemoglobin. And if it's free, if it's on its own like this, so these hemes are on their own, they can actually alter the cytoskeletal proteins of red blood cells. So if these are the red blood cells here, this free heme can alter the cytoskeletal proteins of these red blood cells, and we don't want that, right? Because cytoskeletal proteins are important for those red blood cells, and we don't want them to be altered by this free heme. Not only does heme not only can heme alter the cytoskeletal proteins in red blood cells, it can also cause oxidative stress, as well as heme-bound iron loss. So basically what hemopexin does to counteract these effects is, or to prevent these from happening, these things from happening, is it transports these free hemes, okay, these hemes that are on their own, and it takes it to the liver. It takes them to the liver, where they are degraded. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about for the iron, the liver function of iron, that relates to iron, is just the fact that iron is stored in the liver, or it can be stored in the liver, stored in liver as something called ferritin. Okay. Yeah. Now let's talk about the liver's function that relates to copper. So, liver's copper-related function. Okay. So when copper is absorbed, so I'll just write copper. Actually, I'll keep everything. I'll keep this liver function. Okay, yeah. So let's write copper. So when copper is absorbed, it is going to enter the liver. Eventually, it's going to enter the liver, okay, after it's been absorbed. And what the liver does is it controls the disposition of copper. So it controls where the copper is going to go, sort of. So controls disposition. Okay. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of this over here. Okay. Yeah, so what the liver does, is it controls the disposition of copper. So how it does that is when the copper comes by the liver, the copper gets absorbed into the liver, some of the copper gets absorbed into the liver, or the copper gets absorbed into the liver, and then what happens is something called copper ATPase copper ATPase basically regulates whether the copper is going to be excreted in the bile or if it is going to be used to produce something called ceruloplasmin. So here I'll say, so copper, right? It's in the liver now, and it can go two ways. It can either go and become cerulo. Oh, that looks like a. Okay. Yep. Okay. Ceruloplasmin, or it can go and be excreted in the bile. Excreted with the bile, I guess. Excreted with bile. Okay. So the copper ATPase is going to mediate how much of the copper is going to be excreted and how much of it is going to stay in your body as ceruloplasmin. Okay. So how is it going to do that? Well, this copper ATPase is going to promote this. So it's going to promote, okay? So if there's more copper ATPase than that, then more ceruloplasmin is going to be produced. If there's less, more of the copper will be excreted with the bile. And the way copper is converted into ceruloplasmin is it reacts with something called I'll just write it out. Apoculoplasmin. Okay. All right. I'll just make sure I said that. I spelled that right. Pretty sure. Okay. So this apoculoplasmin is going to react with the copper, it's going to form ceruloplasmin with copper. And that process is promoted by copper ATPase. Okay. So that is how the liver controls how much copper controls copper disposition. So it can either be excreted into the bile, which means it will be excreted from your body, right? Because the bile goes into the intestines, where it will leave, or it can turn into ceruloplasmin. And what does ceruloplasmin do? Well, ceruloplasmin is actually a copper transport it plays a role in copper transport in the blood flow. So actually, I guess I'll just write copper carrying protein. It's a copper carrying protein. Okay, in the blood flow. So copper is used to produce a copper carrying protein. Okay, and then this protein will carry copper in the blood. So you can see copper ATPase, if there's a lot, then it will result in more copper being converted into ceruloplasmin, which actually carries copper in the bloodstream. So overall, this will result in just generally more copper in your bloodstream. Whereas if there's less copper ATPase, then the copper will be excreted with the bile, so there will be overall there will be less copper in your bloodstream. Okay, So that pretty much concludes this video. Thank you.